A very good morning. If you've just woken up or just tuned in, we're in Sandton, Woodmead, just north of Johannesburg. And today, this is the venue for the latest in the series of New Age business briefings brought to you by the SABC, and today kindly sponsored by Transnet. And in sharp focus today, you would have heard about 10 days ago, the Deputy President on a Sunday making an announcement. A figure was given out, 3,500 Rand. What does that mean to you? Well, that's being mooted as a starting point for this conversation that's taking place around the national minimum wage. And I think we need to point out right from the outset that this is not the same as a living wage, but this is a minimum wage. And we'll explain what that means and what the journey still has to be in terms of getting to a final figure, because it seems as if 3,500 isn't the end. Employers are saying one thing. They're saying, look, we can only afford so much. Employees are saying, listen, if I have to live and survive, I need X amount. And I suppose a happy compromise somewhere in the middle is where all the parties are trying to get to. But to help us in this conversation, and you too can be a part of it at home by tweeting at Morning Live SABC or hashtag TNA BizBrief, hashtag TNA BizBrief, and that's with the BIZ. To introduce our panelists, let me start with the current president of the Congress of South African Trade Unions, affectionately known as Cosatu, President Sdumo Dlamini. Thank you very much indeed. Welcome to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Peter, and good morning to the audience and the viewers at home.
Next to you, we have Dr. Danisa Baloyi, who's the newly elected president of the Black Business Council. Thank you for joining us and welcome to you.
Thank you, Peter, and to the viewers at home.
Next to you, we have from the Motor Industry Bargaining Council, the General Secretary there, Mr. Mkhwanazi. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and welcome to all the viewers at home.
All right, and somebody that you may have seen or heard his voice a few times, Clive Ramathibela Smith, thank you very much for joining us. Market analyst, business analyst, he sees and hears everything and tries to make sense of it. But perhaps let's start this conversation, Mr. Dlamini. You've been involved, it's been running plus minus about 2 years. Take us through the journey. What informed the idea of a minimum wage, and how did we get to this figure of 3,500 Rand?
No, thank you very much. Indeed, it's been a very, very long journey. We would talk about 2 years when we effectively began to negotiate at Nedlac, but the journey would have started as far back as 1955. In the Freedom Charter, the living document of the people of South Africa, which said we should have a minimum wage in South Africa. So you talk about 62 years of that journey. Today, we now have a proposal, as we have just put it, a product of negotiations that started 2 years ago, when the President of the Republic assigned the Deputy President of the Republic to lead and coordinate these negotiations at Nedlac with all the social partners there, at a time where we were solely dependent on the Taylor Commission's report, which was commissioned in 2003, which indeed said South Africa can have a national minimum wage. We had partners differing in opinions. There's been tours all over the world to do research and see examples, because we didn't want a national minimum wage of Germany, whilst Germany has it and have had it in a specified period of time. We want a South African model, and we all had then agreed we need that. We worked over the 2 years until we had all our figures in one plate, and we then said, let's have another set of researchers who must then go and look and put things together, check all things that need to be checked, and come and make a proposal of one figure that tries to unite everybody. That's where we are.
Okay. Dr. Baloyi, you've been part of this process as well
Yes.
for the 2 years. And what would you say are the major issues on both sides, really, in terms of having to consider what this minimum wage might look like? Employers are saying one thing, employees are... What are the major key points for both sides?
It's employers, employees, and the general public.
Right.
Because this will affect every one of us sitting here. I think one of the things that we need to applaud is that the social partners embarked on this. This is business, there's labor, is the community, and government. We debated this issue over time, and I think, as President Sdumo said, it's sitting now with the outcome of the report of the researchers. From the BBC side, we're going to further interrogate and discuss with the social partners, because that's what we have done up to this point, to find one that will suit us. But you asked the question, what is it that weighs heavily on this debate? One is that it should, maybe let me start by saying we all agree there should be a minimum wage in our country. But what comes through is that we have to make sure that it's affordable. And I'm not going to just use the employer in this case. It's ordinary people. If I'm a young graduate who has just gotten married, it's two of us, and we have a domestic worker, just to use that as an example. And I'm in Limpopo, somewhere in Guyana. Will I be able to pay the same as someone sitting in Sandton? Those are discussions that we have to have. And a company that is small, will they be able to pay the same minimum wage as a big conglomerate? So those discussions are real. Can I afford it as a small, medium-sized enterprise versus a big company? The reality, though, goes back to the employee who has to live with the salary afforded them. Can they or can they not? And I like to talk about the contradictions of the world. We have billionaires, we have millionaires, and we have what I'd call thousandaires. So balance that, and we try and figure out as to whether they can live on the minimum wage. What are the practicalities when we have to factor in transport, we have to factor in the food that they have to buy, we have to factor in transport. So it's not easy, and I'm glad that we are going to continue the discussions. This is not the end yet,
Okay.
but at least we have a basis of discussion. That's the figure that has been thrown at us,
right.
and that's the figure we have to look at going forward.
Okay, Mr. Mkhwanazi, let me turn to you. Motor Industry Bargaining Council, and what you do as a bargaining council is negotiate these salaries and these wages. Will you have a job still if we set up this minimum wage?
I think it is an important point, and I think that is the most important issue for collective bargaining at the moment in South Africa. Remember, you've got two models in South Africa. You've got sectoral determination, which deals with those that are not in the collective bargaining environment, and then you've got those that are in the collective bargaining council itself. That is an important issue, but the biggest problem that we've had over a period of time in South Africa is that the collective agreements that we've had are only focusing on wages. And there isn't really proper dialogue about ensuring and making sure, like Ms. Danisa is indicating, about conversation about sustaining viability and making sure that we continue business in South Africa. If there are changes that are taking place, for example, in my sector where I am, forecourt attendants are still going and pouring petrol in your car. But what's happening globally is the fact that you don't find that happening. Are we having that kind of conversations within that collective bargaining environment? So for me, I see an opportunity rather than collective bargaining failing, but that needs to be looked at very carefully by the social partners when they are dealing with the issue of the national minimum wage, rather than just focusing on minimum wage. There should be a conversation that says, how do we ensure that we support collective bargaining and it continues to do what it's supposed to do, because collective bargaining is not only about wages only.
Okay.
Yeah.
Clive, I'm going to talk big picture with you now. So I did basic economics when I was studying, and one of the things that pushes things like inflation and so on and so forth is the payroll, wages. So, and our economy can't afford to have inflation running away with us. So the question now becomes, as an economy, we've got, I think the president was talking about the number of millions of people that are already underneath this minimum wage threshold. It would be a shock to the economy if we woke up one morning and every single person who's below that threshold suddenly has to cross that line. Could the economy survive such an event?
The simple answer is no. And the reason why I say that is because we're sitting now, we've just heard our unemployment rate has just increased to 27.1%. So we've got a heavy responsibility in the country with unemployed people. And it's not just unemployed now. Now we have even graduates who are unemployed, and it's a serious problem. So we did the research, and obviously you analyze what's happening in the rest of the world as well. You have to take that into consideration. In this current state where South Africa is, can it afford a minimum wage? And the simple answer is no. And it's not because we're trying to be better about it, Peter. I think the most important thing is you need to take into consideration the different sectors that we have. You have to take into consideration the unique circumstances that South Africa finds itself in. We are heavily reliant on social grants, and obviously that's also part of government. So by introducing that, when you have already a situation, especially in the retail sector, where South Africans are making outcry about jobs being lost to foreigners because at least the employer realizes that foreign individuals are prepared to take whatever is available to them, so they'll obviously get that job. The question we should be having is, how do we fight this scourge of unemployment in the country? Businesses already come out very strongly to say, it's going to be very difficult to keep up that minimum wage, especially because what you want to do at the core of any economy, you want a participation of small to medium enterprises. Those are the guys that actually run and drive the economy. Big conglomerates, your listed JSE listed businesses, they could probably afford it and they could get to the minimum wage. But these guys that are supposed to be the entrepreneurs, the spirit that we are driving, these guys will not be able to afford a minimum wage. And these are the guys that actually are supposed to be assisting us into eradicating unemployment in the country.
All right, so we can't afford it, but it is something that we must do because it's the right thing to do. We'll explore how we balance this then, doing the right thing even if we can't afford it. We'll find out after this break. Stay with us.